Hey, what's up YouTube? I'm Shotgun Shogun, and this is going to be a quick dirty guide on what you should be looking for when it comes to gear and how to determine what a piece is worth and whether or not you should roll and keep that piece of gear. Now, I am currently crafting a whole bunch of gear. Right now, I'm doing speed chasing, which a lot of people are going to be like, oh, hey, I speed chase too. Well, welcome to depression, because, well, you've already got it because you've been chasing speed. But if you are a mid to late game player, a mid to early end game player, chances are you don't necessarily know what you should be keeping, what you should be rolling, and what you should be looking for. Now, this is going to be varied from person to person because every person's account is completely different, which is why when you have somebody come in on a Discord and they're like, hey, what should I do? Should I keep this piece of gear? Hey, is this piece of gear pretty good? Oh, you've been to Facebook and you've seen somebody go, hey, is this worth keeping? Can I use this on anybody? And you have somebody that says, oh, hey, that's not 24 speed, literal garbage, just dump it. You don't know that person's gear, you don't know that person's account. So one of the first things that you as a player have to do is understand where your account is. Do you feel like you're a mid-game player? Do you feel like you are an early late game player? How many characters do you have geared? This is a whole big thing, and honestly, in the past, this is one of the things that has turned a lot of people off to Epic 7 because gearing is rough. Right now, one of the things that you have to first really go at is what are the stats that you can roll. Now, I'm going to cut this because I need to pull up a graph. So there's going to be a cut right here. So we're back, and this is going to show off the Epic 7 substat possibilities here. Now, one of the things that you're going to want to point out here is on weapon, you can only get health percent, attack percent, speed, critical hit chance, critical hit damage, effect resist, and effectiveness. You'll notice that there's no defense on here, and there's no flat attack. That's because, well, the weapon itself has flat attack, and, well, you can't roll defense on here. Helmets, percent health, attack, defense, effect resist, and effectiveness. You've also got flat attack, flat defense, speed, critical hit chance, and critical hit damage. Armor, you can't have any attack, flat or percent on that one. Boots are going to have a main stat, necks are going to have a main stat, rings are going to have a main stat. Whatever the main stat is on those, can't run it on the substat. So that's why things like weapon, because it has attack main substat, or attack main stat is flat, you can't have an attack substat. So if you're looking for speed main stat boots with a speed substat, well, you're never going to get that because it can't happen. Same with percent health main stat ring and a percent substat on that percent main stat ring. So these are some of the just basics overall. Now, one of the things that you really don't want to waste your time on is blue gear. The other thing too, and this is something, if you're an early late game player, honestly, I don't even bother with the 78 gear that you get from events, that you get from side stories, because you cannot reforge this and it's going to just be a waste of mats. Now, sometimes, like if you're a player, and I would say that if you're not able to do Wyvern 13, you are a mid-game player. Once you get to Wyvern 13, you're an early, late game player, and Wyvern should be the hunt that you are most focused on at the beginning, because Wyvern is going to help you with A13, with B13, with C13. Don't do Golem. Just don't do it. Don't do Golem. There's 3 people who've ever played this game that farm Golem, and that's it. That's really it. If you want some health stuff, get it from your monthly whale coin shop or world boss. That's really what it is. Now, one of the things too that you're going to want to think about here is percent health, percent attack, percent defense, percent effectiveness, and effect resist all can roll 4 to 8% on an 85% or on an 85 piece of gear. These are all going to be consistent over the course of this. Now, you can get a +9, but that's on 88 gear. That's going to be right here. So we're going to go down here to the percentages for an 85 piece of gear. Now, attack percent, 4 to 8%. Boom, easy. Defense, this is going to be flat. You get 28 to 35. A flat defense, actually not as bad as some people will tell you. A lot of people, as soon as they see a piece of gear with flat on it, they're going to say it's garbage, and I'm going to explain why later, that this is not necessarily always the case. Percent defense, like I said, 4 to 8%. Health is going to be 157 all the way up to 202. Now, this is going to be on epic gear, obviously. Heroic gear here right next to it, and I'm going to link this in the description, by the way, so that you have all of this available for you. We're mostly looking at epic here. The flat stats are going to be a little bit different than the percentage stats, but really at the same time, you're not going to be focused too much on flat stats, because if you're an early to mid late game player, you're not min-maxing on like percent health, flat health as well. That's something you want a little bit later. Speed, 2 to 5% on epic, 1 to 4% on heroic. Now, as you can see here, the probability of the 5 speed on an epic piece of gear, 0.332%. It happens. Very, very rare. Effectiveness 4 to 8%, effect resist 4 to 8%, critical hit percent chance is 3 to 5, and your critical hit damage is 4 to 7. Now, this is going to be what you kind of want to keep in mind as things go. So when you're starting to look at a piece of gear, we're going to flip back over to this, and we're going to pull up a couple of pieces of gear here just to kind of look at things. So if we take a look at let me find one that hasn't been rolled here. So not only that, but here's another thing that you want to take into consideration. You want to take into consideration your set bonus and whether or not it is something that you need for said character, right? Now, if you are, now let's say like this piece right here has pretty decent substats for a bruiser. It's crit set, typically not a piece of gear that as a late game player you would really want to be using on a character, because a lot of times you want like immunity, you want speed, you want penetration set, which up until 6 months ago people didn't know even existed, but now people be like, bro, where's your pen set? One of the best things that you can do as a player is learn gearing for yourself instead of continuously asking people that only parrot what streamers and YouTubers tell them is the best set. I'm always a big proponent of you learning what it is that you need to learn. Now, when you're taking a look at this piece, first off, you're going to see that it has flat health on this. Now, what determines that this is a bruiser piece of gear? 2 defensive stats, 1 attack stat, and speed. Now, you don't necessarily need speed here. I usually put speed into the other category. Having a speed substat is always good. But when you get a piece of gear, you can determine whether or not it is bruiser, speed opener, tank, or support. Now, you want to be looking at every piece of gear holistically. Maybe you're trying to gear out an opener. You want a speed opener, right? But if you're not looking at every single piece of gear that you have and objectively going, I could potentially use this on a support, I could potentially use this on a bruiser, I could potentially use this on an aggro DPS, I could potentially use this on something else, you are doing yourself a disservice for your account, because you never know where your gear is going to take you. Because in Epic 7, it's not necessarily the style that you want to play, but it's the style that your account lets you play. There will be people that for years will roll speed and chase speed and never be fast, but their account is blessed with tank gear. They have 80 gear score tank gear for every tank unit. Everything is 30k, but it's dirt slow. So you really want to be looking at every single piece of gear. Now, with the advent of the modification stones, this does make things a lot easier. Now, let's say you don't want percent health on here. Let's say you want to turn this into a aggro DPS piece of gear. Let's say you roll this a little bit. So we go in, and this is one of the methodologies that I have all the time with pieces of gear, right? You only upgrade it in steps. So you want to go, all right, we're going to take it to the first step. Once you get here, you look at it. Okay, so we started with 7%. We're at 15%. So that means that we got a max roll on health. This is something you want to keep in mind when you're looking at this. You don't want to just instantly go, bam, all right, let's plus 15 this and then figure it out later, because that's going to waste a lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of gold. Where if, let's say, that first one was a minimum roll, let's say we got 4% HP on this, and you have to kind of come to the consideration of, is this piece of gear worth this? Now you want to ascertain whether or not, I like using that word, it's a big word, it makes me sound smart, right? You want to ascertain whether this piece of gear is worth continuing at every step. Now, +3 and +6, easy. It really doesn't take much. You can roll that into something else. At +9, you make the determination on whether you're taking that to +15 or if you're stopping at +9, because you only have 2 rolls left. And if you're already on the fence at +9, just call it a day and keep going. Now, so we already have a +4 here, so let's see what the next one is. Okay, so that's 5, 6. We have 2 max HP rolls into this at +6. Also, I'm going to roll gear for videos more often, because that's double max roll. We started at 7%. This is a really, really healthy piece of gear. This is going to go perfectly into a bruiser that doesn't necessarily need immunity, or if you bring something that has immunity along with you, there's a whole lot of other factors. But we're at +6 on this right now. This is, for all intents and purposes, a very, very nice piece of gear. So we're going to take it to +9 as it is right now. Even if you get like a min or a mid roll here, this is going to be pretty solid. So we get another +3 and we get 4 speed. So far we have had 3 max rolls into this piece of gear. Now at +9, like I said before, this is where you determine, are you going to be taking this to +15 or are you going to be stopping? If you got 3 plus max rolls, you kind of keep going, right? Now, if these were any min rolls or mid rolls, you would want to move on. Now, again, this is turning out to be a disgustingly good piece for any sort of bruiser. Somebody who needs HP. This could be really good for a green violet. This could be really good for a champ Zerato, because he can't be stunned, so you don't really need immunity set for him, but you do need him to be a little on the thick side, right? You know, anybody who dispels buffs, yes, like an ML Surmia or a Fighter Maya or a Designer Wilbet. There's a lot of different options that you can do with this piece of gear. So we're going to take it to 12. Again, even if this rolls a minimum roll at this point, this piece of gear is still pretty good. Now, there's a whole thing too out there. Okay, so this is just a healthy piece of gear. Now, that was not a max roll right there, but that was still a pretty good roll. So at this point, you take this to 15. We already started on this journey. We're gonna take this to 15. And as I said, this is going to end up being a really paid actor Drake sword. Yes, 100%. We're just gonna be doing rolls now for videos. So here we go. We're gonna get 8% health. No, we're going to get a low roll on attack. But overall, this piece of gear, even though we didn't get a max roll on the health, and we did get a pretty low roll on the attack, actually we got a min roll on the attack, overall this piece of gear is really solid. I'll leave a link as well down to a gear score calculator, or if you're familiar with fribbles or anything like that. I know that's a whole other can of worms to open up, but you can actually look at the gear score to determine, you know, what it is you want to do, like how number wise it works out. But I want to show you like some other pieces of gear that may not necessarily be good, right? So let's take this piece of gear right here. Effectiveness and effect resist are two things that when you are a mid to new late game player, if you have both of these on a piece of equipment, I do not suggest rolling them unless you really want to mod stone one of those two things off, because chances are if you're using somebody who needs effect resist, it is a support. In which case, most of the time, the effectiveness is not very important. Most Soul Weavers do not need effectiveness. They need health, they need speed, they need defense, they need effect resist. So unless you wanted to mod the effectiveness off into defense, this piece of gear I would not necessarily suggest wasting your time on. You can +3 or +6 this just to see if effectiveness or speed rolls, and then go from there. But I definitely do not suggest really wasting a lot of your time on effectiveness and effect resist on one piece. Not only that, but really as you're leveling up your gear, I wouldn't necessarily focus on chasing effect resist. That's more something that you want to do a little bit later on for characters like Soul Weavers, like your support. But it is very important after a certain point, because well, you are going to need high effect resist on people like Ruel, on Maid Chloe, on Amelia's, on Diane's, on any of your Soul Weavers that you're intending to take into PvP. Not only that, but if you want to roll effect resist on people like ML Ken or A Ravi or some of your bruiser units. Now that's a whole other advanced story. But to loop back around to the very beginning, one of the things that you do really want to look at is how many substats. Oh, that's +9, and that rolled very horribly. But you want to look at how many substats do I have that I want on this piece of gear. Does this piece of gear make me happy? And typically, if you have 3 out of the 4, you should attempt to roll it. Like this piece of gear right here: critical hit damage, attack, health, effect resist. Now, this would be good for an effect resist bruiser, but you really want this to roll into critical hit damage, attack, or health. Now, again, like I said before, things for bruisers: 2 defensive, 1 to 2 offensive, and then 1 other. This is a pretty good piece of bruiser gear right here. Now, a lot of people would look at this and be like, ugh, effect resist, gross, I hate effect resist. Again, you can mod this off into speed if you wanted to, but on a red piece of gear, 3. You want to attempt to roll anything with 3 substats for the character that you're looking for. If we go over to, let's take this one. Now, this is a conundrum, right? Because you have a hit set. This is not good for anybody who would use these substats. You have a mid critical hit chance, you have a mid roll health chance, you have a low roll critical hit damage, and a mid roll attack on a hit set. Now, if these were all maxed out, I would suggest rolling this because you could use this as an offset. Not the most optimal, but not the worst. But because it's hit set, this is something that you do have to take into consideration, because if you're using offset pieces, this reduces the amount of extra bonus stats that you can get. Now, if the stats rolled godly and all of these were maxed out, you can get away with not having an immunity set, not having a penetration set, not having a 2-piece set, and then working around a 4-piece speed set, right? So an issue that you will run into: wrong set, perfect substats. You really have to ascertain, do I want to try rolling this? If you are hurting for DPS substats, I would suggest potentially +3 or +6. See how the substats roll. It can be a piece that you can use broken set. Too many people, I do think, at certain times will focus on, this is a hit set, I'll never use this on anybody. Me personally, that's true, because I have a much higher gear level. Where I'm at, I have to be exponentially more picky, and I think that newer players and mid-level and even early late game players watch streamers and watch YouTubers whose gear level is exponentially higher than theirs, and they feel, I have to be as picky as this person. It's a mindset that you really need to get yourself out of. That's really the big philosophy of what you want to do when you're looking at pieces of gear, right? So take this piece of gear, for example, here. Now, you might look at this and be like, okay, but that's a minimum health roll. It is a almost max critical hit chance. It's 8 maximum effectiveness. It's 4% speed. This piece right here can potentially be amazing for an opener. If something has 4 speed on it, always +3, always +6. No ifs, ands, or buts. I don't care if it's purple. I don't care if it's red. If it's got 4 speed, you +3, +6, chase the speed. Honestly, done. Do you think a broken set would work on a unit who's made for hunts? Yes. As long as you get the stats, that's really where it needs to be. But this is one of the things that I will always say: 4 speed, roll for it. 3 speed even. +3, +6. If the stats don't go the way you want, then dump the piece of gear. But this is a pretty good piece. Even let's say it just rolls speed, you can get rid of the critical hit chance for something else like a defense or something along those lines. It has effectiveness on it. This is great for an opener debuffer. Now, as a mid to early late game player, debuffers are not something necessarily that you want to really work on, just because it takes a lot of stats and a lot of gear score to make them work. But chasing speed is never a bad idea. You're going to need years to get your speed gear anyways. So that is kind of the philosophy around gearing. So when it comes to tanks, you want speed, health, defense, effect resist. When it comes to support, you want health, defense, speed, effect resist. Tanks and supports are basically the same exact thing. So it's easy when it comes to gear like that. When it comes to aggro DPS, you want speed, critical hit chance, critical hit damage, and attack. So you would want these substats right here. If this didn't roll absolutely terribly, this would be the perfect piece for like a speed aggro DPS character. These are the 4 that you want. Even if you had like something else on here, 3 out of the 4 is worth for an aggro DPS. Bruiser is 2 flavors of Bruiser. You have defensive Bruiser, which is 2 defensive stats, an attack stat, and then an other stat, whether it's speed or another attack. And then you have a DPS Bruiser, which is 2 attack stats, a defense stat, and an other stat. When it comes to speed debuffers, you want speed, effectiveness, and typically you want 2 defensive stats. So you want effectiveness and then support, so that they can live if they get outsped, or just so that they can stick around a little bit longer. So those are kind of the philosophy around rolling gear, right? There's a lot of other factors. There's a ton of other things when it comes to it. Who do you have built? Who are you trying to build? There's a lot of pieces of gear that I just sit on because I'm like, this rolled really, really, really good, but I don't have anybody to put this on. Sometimes when you're a newer to early late game player, that is a bit of a waste of your resources, and you should be focusing on very specific things, like gearing out your very specific characters. But don't pass by a good piece of gear just because you're focused on something else, because then at some point you might need that piece of gear, and then you have to go back, you have to roll that, or you know, whatever, you may have passed up on something really, really solid. But like I said, in the description I'm going to have a link to the substat percentages and what goes there. One of the things that you absolutely have to drill into your head is the ranges, because as you are leveling up that piece of gear, +3, +6, +9, you want to ascertain at every single one of those steps, how much more can I go, and is this worth this? That is the philosophy around leveling gear and learning gear score, learning the percentages, learning what you're looking for, making sure that you have minimum 3 out of the 4 of those stats that you need on those sets. That's the path to becoming good at gearing. That's just how it is. If you guys like this video and it helped out, and you have any questions, let me know in the comments section. Smash the subscribe button, the bell notification. I stream on YouTube and Twitch quite regularly, so if you want to know when I go live, you can also join the Discord. Follow me on MySpace, Twitter, Instagram, PayPal, Patreon, LiveJournal, Pinterest, all of those. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.